Hello everyone, my name is Darren Maines, and this is my presentation on the observations and recommendations that I had on my selected site. My site was at the Target on Stephanie and Sunset Road, which is located in a shopping outlet by the Hobby Lobby, Ross, McDonald's, and other stores and restaurants. It was surrounded by Sunset Station, the Galleria Mall, and it's also located in the Whitney Ranch neighborhood, which had a walk score of about 39, which kind of shows that this area is already car dependent, and there isn't much active transportation happening in this area. So how did I assess these observations? It included a combination of various tools to kind of transform my personal observations into actual data that we could use. So this would include the walk score, maths, mini, and then PEDS. So let's start with the barriers and the negative features that do not support active transportation. One being there were no bike facilities at all. No bike lanes are within 1 mile of the target on Sunset or Stephanie. And there was no form of protection for cyclists. There was no buffer. There was no bike lane. There was really no space for cyclists in this area, and that was observed to seeing 0 cyclists in the area during the assessment and throughout my time passing it. Um, which shows this area, the cyclists do not feel comfortable and do not feel supported by the lack of bike facilities, so they're not going to use this area. There were also narrow and obstructed sidewalks. They were obstructed by telephone poles and electrical boxes, which reduces kind of which kind of shows the less than 5 feet of width, um, and it kind of makes the have minimal capacity and makes it difficult to share that sidewalk with those in wheelchairs and other pedestrians, and also if cyclists are using that space as well. And the sidewalks were interrupted by 4 driveways into the shopping outlet. There were no crosswalks, no marked crosswalks, and there were no stop signs. So motor vehicles just turn into the area um, and not look for pedestrians, which could cause accidents, make the pedestrians feel unwelcomed. Um, so it kind of shows the area was kind of focused on cars getting to the target, and not pedestrians crossing the street. The sidewalks were completely exposed. There was no form of protection from oncoming traffic. There was no buffer. There was no landscaping, no street trees, no bike lane, or no off-street parking. It was just the right turn lane in the street, which makes pedestrians feel exposed, unsafe, and it can be dangerous and increase the likelihood of accidents to happen. And they were in fair condition, some bumps, cracks, and holes. And then the roads were just completely car-friendly. 6 to 9 lanes of traffic. Six were on Stephanie and 9 were on Sunset, with no pedestrian refuges at all within the crosswalks. The speed limit was about 45 miles per hour, which can cause fatal accidents or at least severe injuries. And then the road was in extremely good condition. There were very few bumps, cracks, and holes. This area was made for cars. It wasn't made for pedestrians and cyclists, and that's observed through those observations. There was expansive off-street parking, so Target had a really mass parking lot of over 100 parking spaces um, with no on-street parking. So that pushes stores away from the street, away from the sidewalk, which puts the area at an economic disadvantage. So if a pedestrian were to walk past the Target, if it was on the store and they saw something that they wanted to remember that they needed to get something, they're more likely to go in if it was on the sidewalk, not 100 parking spaces behind them. And it was, again, the parking was in pretty fair condition, some bumps, cracks, and holes. And some other kind of miscellaneous barriers. The lighting was road oriented, which limits visibility for pedestrians and cyclists at night, which again puts them at a disadvantage. And then there were minimal street trees. About 10 to 20% of the sidewalk was covered, which makes it extremely dangerous, especially in the Las Vegas summers about the 120-degree heat. It can cause heat stroke, heat exhaustion, and just can be unsafe. So that was a long list of negative features. So let's get into the very small list of positive facilitators. Number one being mixed land use. However, this is limited. There is a residential and commercial zone, but that it was a residential neighborhood right behind the Target, but it's divided by a wash and it's a single entry community surrounded by a wall. Um, There are some like bridges all scattered throughout, but it does make the area a little hard to access if you live up in the target, you still have to walk behind the wall, walk, or the more likely to drive their car to the target than actually walk there. The area is really pretty connected. There are three shuttle transit stops. Two were on Stephanie, one was on Sunset. And that just establishes connectivity in the area and makes the target more accessible to those who aren't in walking distance. And then there were two channel right turn lanes, which provided two refuges. Although they weren't in the middle of the crosswalk, and they slightly minimize the distance to cross the street. It also makes the pedestrians more protected from those making a right-hand turn. With also minimal graffiti, vandalism, litter, the area is clean and well maintained. It provided a good foundation for potential changes, and the area is pleasant to walk through. There just makes it very difficult to walk through all those negative features. So here are some examples. So here you can see this is the crosswalk of Stephanie and Sunset. This is crossing Sunset, and it's about 9 lanes of traffic with about 30 seconds to cross it. That makes it really difficult, especially those who aren't or those who are in a wheelchair or who have some sort of physical disability. And here's one of the shuttle transit stops, and then the no bike lane, no sort of protection. This is just the right-hand turn lane and the express sidewalk. So this shows that the area is extremely car dependent. There are multiple barriers, and the low walks show the area just relies on cars and does not rely on active transportation. So what can we do from here? There was not one solution to improve AT in the area. There are multiple solutions of different focuses with a lengthy construction process and a pretty hefty price tag. Um, so the three main recommendations that we should start with first, with road diet being the first priority. Um, just from decreasing to 4 lanes, so 2 lanes on each side, would make the area way more safer for pedestrians and cyclists. And then implementing the pedestrian refuges at the crosswalk or at the intersection of Stephanie and Sunset, and then lowering the speed limit to 25 miles per hour. So although this isn't part of the road diet, this will make the area much more safer, and if the accidents were to happen, they wouldn't be fatal and they'd be less severe. And so adding some bike facilities as well. So adding a bike lane would also contribute to the road diet, and then just putting some bikers at the target would just provide space for cyclists and make them feel more welcome and supported in this area. And then improving the aesthetic. Um, Also has some safety things, so putting street trees would prevent against the heat in the Las Vegas summer, and then adding pedestrian-focused lighting would make them more visible at night. So where would these go? So the lighting and the trees would all go on kind of this side right here, and then there would be pedestrian refuges at this crosswalk right here, and then again bike lanes all throughout this area on each side of the street. So how much is it going to cost? The short answer, it's a lot. So bike lanes, for only about 2 miles, it'd be about $21,000. So it'd be a start. This would have to be expanded in the future. And then two pedestrian refuges that would cost about $26,000. And then the speed limit signage would be about $50, so that's a pretty easy cost. Street trees about 2,000, bike racks about 500 for two, and then 10 light poles. There's a little typo right here. It would be about 6,100. So these prices were retrieved from various local analysis of AT features and distributors such as Amazon. So in total, we about $55,000, and this would increase with additional physical improvements, so adding the bike lane, adding more refuges, just making the area more accessible, but also make it more expensive. So after these recommendations, what's going to happen? How will we know these are actually working? So conducting the same assessments that I did 6 months to a year after implementation, so the Maths Mini, the PEDS, assessing the walk score, would see if there was any changes to the area, if it was promoting active transportation a little more. Also, just asking pedestrians and cyclists in the area if they feel more supported before and after the implementations. And then looking at traffic and accident data to see if the accidents went down, if the traffic is still, if the traffic is more or less congested, and then viewing traffic cams. Can also look for little details and see how the area has changed before and after computer intervention. So that concludes my presentation. So in conclusion, this area is car dependent. There is really no features that strongly support um, pedestrians and cyclists, but there is a foundation into mixed land use in that the shelter transit stops. So the recommendations would help make this area more accessible through adding bike lanes and just increasing that road diet. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask me. And other than that,